A very good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone from across the world. Uh, my name is Kunal Kumar. I work with the Government of India leading the Smart Cities mission. I'm based out of New Delhi, and I am the moderator and host for the evening. This is actually the last session for the RAISE Summit. It's called Impact of Data and AI in Smart Cities and Mobility. I welcome all of you, the participants, and all the esteemed panelists to this discussion, which is scheduled between 5 and 7 today. Uh, in the beginning, I'll just try to set a brief context. I will introduce the panelists, and then it will be the keynote speech first, and then we'll have the panelists speak with us one by one, followed by questions, and at the end we have a video demo by Jayant, which I'll talk about later. So without much further wastage of time, I just want to emphasize maybe beginning that we have to realize that this is the century of cities. Uh, 2006 was when 50% of the world started living in cities. And by the end of this century, we would have close to 80% plus people living in cities. So probably we will have no more city building in the next century. And as that happens, we have to realize that most of the urbanization that's going to happen over the next 2 decades is going to happen in India and Africa. And therefore, the quality of the urbanization that happens in this sphere of the world, perhaps we have to understand it's not only going to be important for these countries, but it's also going to be important for the entire globe because urbanization poses a lot of trade-offs, and unless we choose the right ways of urbanizing, we would probably not be urbanizing sustainably, and therefore we would actually put the entire globe at risk. And so, what does good urbanization actually mean? Leading the smart cities mission, most times people, when they talk about cities and smart cities, they talk about use of technology, and most times smart cities are defined as cities which use technology for the betterment of citizen lives. But we know that we live in a country where it's not so simple to define smart cities. It's a multi-layered approach which is needed, because we have some cities which need a lot of infrastructure investment. There are some cities which have some reasonable amount of infrastructure, but they need to be retrofit. Some new cities need to come up, and some cities really need technological application, investments in modernization, because they have got to be the engines of economic growth. So our cities exist at multiple layers, and technology can only be subservient to the larger national goals, which is about better quality of life for our citizens, better quality of economic growth, sustainable, inclusive, yet rapid. And while you do all that, you have to do it in a climate sensitive way. You have to do it in a sustainable way, a way in which we don't take away from the future generations the resources that they are, that's there for them. So how do we do this urbanization, and how does technology play a role in making this kind of urbanization quality for us? Uh, so urbanization has to be, so for this to happen, we have to use technology, whether it be AI or machine learning or other emerging technologies, to better plan our cities, to better fund our cities, to better govern our cities, to be able to look at infrastructure and services investments through the lens of climate and sustainability. And hence, when we talk about cities, we have to look at holistic picture of how technology has to be used. We have to see the human aspect of technology. Of course, data is at the center of all this, but a lot of people think about data in different ways. How do we build trust at the same time use data for public good? How do we build technology in a way that it evolves as a digital public good, and not as something which excludes some and includes very few? Or maybe it actually becomes an instrument for surveillance, or it's an instrument for something which can actually be detrimental in the long run. And this is something that, in fact, I was just reading a book, I forget her name, which said that today mankind is working on technologies, most of which probably we don't even understand the depth of. And some people will go to the extent of saying that we are working on technologies which may go either way. You never know, because stacks of algorithms and the servers that are taking the decisions on our behalf, you never know what decision will be taken next. Is that responsible? Is that responsible AI for social empowerment? Will that be beneficial to our cities? So these are the kinds of questions we're going to be deliberating on in this session. I have a very nice panel, in fact, mostly from the industry and also from various other organizations. Quickly, I'll introduce them and then probably get out of the way, and the panelists will take over. Our keynote speaker for today is Dr. Shailesh Kumar. He is the chief data scientist at Geo. And well, he is one of the top data scientists and renowned AI experts in the country. And he's also worked as a data scientist in Ola. He's worked in Google, Brain, and Yahoo, and also at Microsoft and many other places. So we will soon hear from him. In fact, his will be the first talk, and after I introduce the panel. Then I think we have Nikhil Malhotra. So Nikhil is the global head of innovation and creator of the Makers Lab, which is a unique thinkator space within Tech Mahindra. With basically, he has about 20 years of experience, and he's been a researcher. He's an avid technologist, and his personal research has been on how quantum computing and neuroscience has inspired the growth of AI. Amazing. So happy to have you, Nikhil. And then we have Prativa Mohapatra. She is Vice President Sales at IBM India, South Asia. And she's over 24 years of experience and expertise in business development, consulting, and various other aspects over a long period of time. And she's an acknowledged leader on emerging technology. Hi, Prativa. Nice having you on the panel. Then we have Dr. Shashank Ojha, someone I have been very closely interacting with over the last few months. He leads the digital development team at the World Bank, and he's a senior digital development specialist with the Digital Development Global Practice of the World Bank. Welcome, Shashank, to the panel. We then have Dr. Sumit Chowdhury, who is CEO of SesoVera, SesoVera Edge AI VoiceTech platform. Hi, Dr. Sumit. Yeah. So he's a global thought leader and CXO in the field of smart cities, telecom, information analytics, and urban design enthusiast. So he would be speaking today at the panel. Then we have Mr. Harjiv Singh, who's the founder and CEO of Gutenberg, which is, it is a digital marketing communications firm. He's a chief storyteller. Now, I would love to have some designation like that, and a serial entrepreneur. And he works extensively with clients across a diverse range of industries and organizations with like technology, real estate, and so on and so forth. So hi, Mr. Harjiv. And at the end, we will have a talk by Dr. Jayant Ratti. He is the founder and MD of Nayan Technologies. He's an experienced innovation leader himself, engineer, robotist, and he has extensive experience in project management, business development, so on and so forth. Founder and tech companies, and he has proven ability to build strong multidisciplinary teams and so on. So a fantastic panel, and of course, even more fantastic set of participants. My request to the panel will be, we'll stick to time, and so that we give ample opportunities for everyone to contribute. At the end of the question answer session, we will also have a video demo, which I'm sure all of you would be interested in seeing. So do hold on till the end of the session. It's a very interesting video session that Dr. Jayant Ratti will be presenting. So without much further time, I would now invite our guest speaker, who's the keynote speaker, Dr. Shailesh Kumar, who is Chief Data Scientist at Geo, to make his talk. So over to you, Dr. Shailesh Kumar. I think you can take on from here. Thank you, everyone, and look forward to this session.
Thank you, Kunal, and thank you all for having us. It's a pleasure and an honor to be part of this panel and this conference. I'm going to just turn off my video in case of bandwidth issues. So what I'm going to talk about today is obviously the theme of the panel is impact of data and AI on smart cities. And one of the themes that I've been working on is, how, things run on AI, right? Whether it is refineries run on AI, or cities run on AI, or Ola runs on AI, or telecom runs on AI. So I thought of this as a theme, and what does it mean? And what are some of the challenges and issues from an AI perspective that, I wanted to share, uh, and especially from the Ola perspective and mobility perspective. So obviously, let's start with the problem statement. I think we have a long way to go, and this is a very important theme for India, because there's a long way for us to go in really building smart cities for the country. If you look at the pollution problem, whether it is air pollution, water pollution, sound pollution, or any other kind of pollution, I think we are quite high up. And just a statistic that uh, 13 of the 20 most polluted cities in the world are Indian cities, right? So there's a lot of work to be done in sort of making our cities cleaner. So a smart city is a clean city with clean water, clean air, and clean food, and all of that. So this is one of the major areas that Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and many such things are going on. The second aspect that I want to highlight about smart cities is that smart cities have to be safer cities. Today in India, one rape happens every 16 minutes in the country, which is not a very good sign. So we have to work on how to make our cities safer through all the technology in surveillance and videos and governance and law and legal systems. How do we make our cities safer for all of us, whether it is women or children and all of us? Third major area of concern is that our cities need to be a lot more robust to natural disasters and all that. So every year during monsoon season, we hear the same stories over and over again. And one of the statistics I saw was that 1/5 of the global deaths due to floods alone is in India. And that is again something that we have to look at. We have had floods in Chennai, in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, in Mumbai, and we keep seeing the same stories in the same season again and again. And there has to be a way out. We know where the flood zones are. We know what we need to do about them. And flood is just one example of any natural disaster that can happen. And another example is obviously traffic. And a smart city is supposed to be an efficient city, efficient not just in traffic but efficient in how we manage our resources. And another gloomy statistic is that 3 out of the 5 worst cities in the world from a traffic index point of view are from India, right? Bangalore tops the list, and Mumbai and Pune, no surprise there. So obviously we have our work cut out, and there's a long way to go. But if we apply our collective might together, and apply the new age technologies, not just AI and data science, but also sensor technologies, connectivity, cloud computing, and many such. Once all these technologies come together, we can, I think, create a lot more efficient system. So one of the first things that I think we should think about is how do we see the evolution of products, and what does AI do in terms of evolution of products, and what does smart city mean in this cycle? So if I look at the first generation products and I think about AI in products, the first generation products are what we call programmed intelligence products. And these are our cars and machineries and washing machines and what have you. And these products don't become intelligent over time. They come with programmed intelligence in them. And this intelligence is what they have. And they are very simple individual products, and they are like that. The second generation products that the world has seen in the last 20 years is what we call, from an AI point of view, a crowd intelligence products. These are products which are mostly virtual in nature, online products like Google, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And these products have shown us how to take data and continuously improve the product over a period of time. And that is a very big revolution in the last 20 years we have seen, where cloud computing, data, and AI and machine learning has come together. And the participation of the people in this product ecosystem has really taken these products to the next level. And that's what we have learned in the last 20 years. And now we are ready for the next generation products. And the next generation products, which I call product 3.0, are what we would call ecosystem intelligence products. And here, the key difference is crowd intelligence products become better because people interact with these products one on one. And ecosystem products are products where, things interact with other things, right? The IoT and other things interact with each other. And when I look at an ecosystem intelligence product, this is a smart city is an example of it. A connected car ecosystem is an example of it. A telecom network is an example of it. A whole refinery is an example of it. These are very, very massive systems. These are 1,000 API systems which need to run, and they are characterized really by trillions of interactions happening all the time, whether it is sensor to data warehouse interaction, whether it is device interaction, whether it is people to system interaction. There are trillions of interactions have happening every day. There are billions of entities, whether it is sensors, people, devices, parts, cars, locations, facilities, roads, what have you. There are billions of entities that are participating in these systems, and we need to make millions of decisions in these systems. And how do we make those decisions better and faster and accurate? And there are hundreds of metrics that we have to drive. And this is the characteristic of the next generation products. And smart cities is a very good example of this level of AI. And so the goal is very clear. If you think of smart city as a service, as a managed service, which is as a single product, think of a city as a product instead of Google search as a product. Think of a smart city as a product. What are we going to need? What are going to be the metrics? And a lot of speakers today will talk about these metrics. We need obviously safe and secure homes and communities, schools and colleges. We need very efficient and robust systems, whether it is commute or energy or water or telecom or retail or medical. All these have to become a lot more efficient and robust. No single point of failures and all of that. And then, obviously we need to increase the quality of air and water, become more energy friendly, environment friendly, and waste recycling and all that. So we have to invest in all these areas simultaneously in order to realize the true vision of smart cities. So, this is where I started thinking about the AI journey of a smart city and what all do we need as an AI platform for all aspects of a smart city. So the first layer is what we would call the sensor and monitoring layer. And we need a layer of a sensor grid of all kinds of sensors, cameras, remote sensing, water, electricity usage, metering, and quality sensors. And these sensors are going to help us tell us what is going on in the cities. The next layer we need is an interpretation and alerting layer, which basically understands the sensor. If a camera is not able to understand who the person is or what the action they are having, or if a time series analysis cannot tell me that something is wrong here or there, or a part is about to fail, uh, then those sensor data is useless. So the first AI work we need to do is start thinking about the interpretation layer on top of the sensor layer. The third layer is measurement and understanding. How do we define and quantify the metrics of safety, efficiency, cleanliness, governance, robustness, and sustainability, and understand, when and why these metrics go up and down. And that is a very important layer. You can call it a dashboard. You can call it, the alerting system. The next layer, obviously, we need to build is the ability to predict and explain. And literally, this means there is a grammar to the city. There is a grammar to how the city commutes. There is a grammar to how the city connects to the, and uses data. There's a grammar to how the city needs energy. There's a grammar to where the crimes are more at what time of day and day of week. There is a grammar to how the water and food and medicines are needed in the city. And with all the data that we can come across, if we can understand the grammar of the city by time, by day of week, by month, and we should be able to predict that in the next 1 hour the commute is going to go up. And once we are able to predict and explain, we should be able to then simulate and optimize our systems. And this is where we need to start thinking about how to build what we call a digital twin of every city, based on the static knowledge about the city, which is where are the points of interest in the city, and the dynamic data that we are collecting, right? Number of people in what part of the city, commute, energy usage, and all that. So how do we think about a simulator which kind of mimics the cities in a digital form, so we can now start applying what if analysis, root cause analysis, and optimization, and say what if I change this lane from 1 lane to 2 lane, what will happen to the traffic? Or if I increase the telecom capacity in this part of the city, how will it change the data consumption and quality? So we need to be able to do these kind of simulations and optimizations using these simulations once we have built all the other layers. And finally, how do we adapt our cities? Because cities are changing not only longitudinally, but within a day, the city in the morning is different than the city in the evening. So how do we adapt for the city, detect changes in population growth, demographic changes, and evolution of the needs of the city by the hour, by the day, by the week, and adapt to those needs and learn from the feedback that we are getting constantly. So this is kind of the AI stack, if you will, with simple to complex things that we need to do in order to take care of all the different aspects of safety, security, and cleanliness and other parts, and how AI can help. And typically an AI cycle, looks very similar in many domains, right? So we monitor everything exhaustively through the sensor layer. We discover issues, whatever needs attention, we pay attention to, whether it's a power failure in some part, or a flood in some part, or a crime happening in some part. We do root cause analysis and figure out why it is happening. And then we synthesize an action and say, this is the best optimal action to do. And then we execute the action and through our systems of operation. And once we execute the action, we measure the impact and say, has the crime gone down? Has the traffic quality gone up? Has the air quality gone up? And if not, we learn from that feedback and continue to do the same cycle over and over again till we start to reach the metrics that we need. So this is kind of the broad, the AI framework that I thought I would put together. Now I'll go a little deeper into my experience with mobility and fleet management and talk about that part of uh, smart cities and share some of the insights that I learned when I worked at Ola and fleet management kind of a smart city project. So the first thing we learned, and this is very obvious to all of us who have worked in cities, that cities are a very dynamic entity, right? What they are in the morning is very different than what they are in the evening. So one of the core AI components that we need to build is sort of what we call demand modeling component, right? What is the water demand of the city, or food demand, or energy demand, or commute demand, or connectivity demand, and how do we model the demand as a function of location, time, hour of day, weekend, weekday, holidays versus non-holidays, rainy season versus summer versus winter. The demand keeps changing and it is very dynamic. So building a robust digital twin of a city, the first step in that direction is to do very accurate demand modeling of the city. The second thing we need to think about is, how do you model a city as a single optimization problem? And this is what we did at Ola. We thought Ola is a combination of many objective functions, but it turns out you can manage it with a very simple notion of efficiency. So the idea is, now we can define efficiency as a gap between supply and demand. And if the supply is more, then one part of it suffers, and if the demand is more, then the other part of it suffers, right? And really, if you think about how can we make our cities smarter and efficient, it's all about putting the right supply for the right demand. And therefore what we need to start thinking is, how do we quantify the value of every location and context? How do we forecast the demand, like we talked about, and how do we optimize supply for it? And this is just not for Ola or for anything. This applies to everything. This applies to our commute demand, our road demand, or power demand, and all of that. And if we break the problem into a very simple set of building blocks, three building blocks really. One is demand modeling, supply understanding and supply optimization, and quantifying the value of the metrics that we have. Then this is a very simple way to think about it. Another thing that I learned at Ola was that typically we won't have one lever, we will have multiple levers to make our cities better. And like in Ola, Uber, we can allocate the cabs differently, we can allocate sharing cab differently, we can price differently, route them differently, we can give different kinds of offers and incentives. So typically in any complex system like a smart city, we have multiple levers, and the key is to find and optimize the right combination of levers to come to the best actions and decisions that we want to make. And so let me just share my template for modeling a complex system like a smart city. And it starts with the set of data that we will have, right? So in the Ola world, we will have data from the customer app, the driver app, the third-party data from weather and events, and online data and other sensors. We will then convert this data into state vectors and say, what is the what is with customers, what are their demand, patterns and all that, what's going on with driving, what is the demand pattern of city, how do we model a location, supply and events. So how do we think about the state vector of the whole city? And then how do we map that into the optimal actions and say, should I do this action or this action or this combination of actions? And how do we learn that over a period of time using techniques like reinforcement learning and multi-agent systems and all that? And then once we do that, how do we look at our metrics from the data and say, is my availability high, fulfillment high, cancellation going down, and profitability going up? And then how do we learn from all this and compute all this? So this is kind of a generic template that we can apply, which basically talks about data to state, state to action, action to metrics, and a continuous learning loop. And if we apply this kind of a learning loop across all the complex systems that we are going to engage with, whether it is traffic modeling or health modeling or energy or waste management, we can apply a very similar template to model all that. We just have to identify the complexity and interaction between metrics, between states, between actions, and the data that we are computing. So with that, let me close. And obviously, smart cities is a very, very complex problem. Like Kunal said, there are many aspects to it. There are many definitions to it. But really, in my mind, it breaks down into two parts, which is how do I understand every part of the city, right? Every location, every person, every apartment, every hospital, every locality. And then how do we optimize in a holistic manner? And if you think of working on smart cities at two levels, at the individual part level and at the whole level, I think we are going to create a new kind of an AI platform that will help us deal with such a complex problem. And truly, smart cities is one of the best and most challenging problems in AI that we can face. So thank you all for your attention, and I look forward to hearing a lot of other panelists on their views on the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shailesh. I think we couldn't have had a better beginning. But what I liked most was that, when we think of a new subject, we're trying to conceptualize or structure our thoughts, we need a framework to begin with. And I think you put the framework there. I think I liked your sense, interpret, measure, predicts, simulate, adapt. That frame gives us a way of thinking about. But at some point of time, it starts to feel almost impossible because there could be so many variables in a city. And is it too exciting a thought which is very difficult to actually implement because ultimately there's so many variables to catch? Can we really sense a city like probably an MRI can sense our body? Is something that is something that we all have to collectively answer and figure out. And it's going to be no easy task, but I think there is a value to it. There's of course a flip side to it also, and we need to take that into account. Um, and so I think the other speakers will definitely touch upon, the advantages. I think they will draw from the framework that you put in place and look at how we build on the framework to make advantages and benefits to our citizens and cities while avoiding the pitfalls and getting into oversimplification because of lack of knowledge of variables which may happen, and therefore you could almost have a situation of great risk that you get into. So I'll stop here, and then now we have Nikhil who is going to make his talk, and over to you, Nikhil.
So thank you so much, Kunal. First of all, thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I hope Dr. Shailesh has probably covered that framework well. So I wouldn't delve into it. I would rather extend that thought. And what me and my team really do is we are a research and development wing. And we essentially do research on neuroscience-inspired algorithms. I think one of the ways that we think is the way Turing described AI, it was more of an imitation game. And that imitation game really stems from the fact that if you can mimic intelligence, you're deemed intelligent. And I think from a smart city perspective, the amount of data that you get, that mimicking of intelligence may be a little constrained, but I'll extend that thought, what Dr. Shailesh really put in. Now, considering from a city's perspective, and I have done that a lot of times, I live in Pune and I actually go to the IT park, and I've actually stopped my car a number of times, and I've actually looked at the flow, as Dr. Shailesh put it, as a dynamic entity a city is, or maybe a municipality is. And since neural networks and AI have evolved from brains, I would rather compare a city to a heart muscle. If you actually sit and see the city in the morning, you would actually see the heart pumping in blood with a lot of traffic going in. There's a lot of work that is happening within the city with supply and demand. And then in the evening, that heart really pumps out blood and the traffic flows out. So if you really consider the heart as a muscle, and you now consider today as what's going on, and you mentioned as well, do we think that cities are on the verge of a heart attack when we are essentially considering a kind of a smart city structure? And we have already seen India, particularly in India, we've seen urbanization grow from 31% to about 45%. Where do we draw the line where we build a smart city? And my suggestion would be, or the way we are essentially looking at it is that this starts from where the blood flow really starts, akin to what an artery or a vessel would do. So the first step, if we have to put up a structure for smart city, in my opinion, would also be towards the smart agriculture. So I think the urbanization where it stems in is the flow of the blood that goes into the city. I think there's a lot of work and there's a lot of talks that have happened in this particular forum where we have looked at precision farming, where we have looked at smart agriculture, etc. And we have essentially looked at, and that's the first stent that you actually put in for that vessel, saying that if you can make agriculture smart, make people stay there and work together, then you would have a better perspective of looking at smart cities and variables. The second stent that we really call it is the transit-oriented development, which we have probably not seen in India. And I think that is, I want to draw based on my experiences with what we have seen in Las Vegas, what we have seen with Melbourne. There's a lot of transit-oriented development that is happening, which will form the second stent of a smart city. And this is beyond the city. We have not even entered the heart at the moment. This is just outside as a vessel parameter that I'm talking about. Transit-oriented development in a very simple formulation really states that wherever the transit point is, where you have metros, where you have trains, etc., it is only at that point that you've given people the ability to work as well as live, so that they have a smaller sector of movement, and that movement does not affect a larger thing. And this is where I think I want to draw in what Dr. Shailesh really said about putting up a digital twin, where AI and a lot of simulations would help us understand where these stents are to put up that TOD. Now, the third challenge really comes in where we enter inside the city or inside the heart, where we have loads of things going on, where we are essentially looking at a smart infrastructure, we're looking at smart delivery, we're looking at smart medicines. What are we doing? We also think that the grammar of the city is also the way people interact with each other in terms of communication. So me and my team are researching on certain facets of what we can do for Sanskrit, or what we can probably look at how dialectized movement of different people can probably come in when they come in the city. The second challenge is, of course, mobility. It's not just mobility of fleet, but also mobility of how people may draw up. And our second research really stems out from the fact that how frugally we could probably look at mobility within a city as an autonomous driving vehicle for level 2. And the idea behind all of that is very simple, that when cities grow up and you will have a large influx, you have a large sensor data being collected, would you also have some kind of an urbanized mobility sector being built up, for the senior citizens, for people who are doing over there? So and then there are different works. I think Dr. Shailesh has put up his thought of saying there are smart homes being built up. Of course, there is smart sewage systems, there's smart water systems. This is all about collection of data. But when you collect all of that data, how do you manage that data in a much more ethical format? So putting up a bubble of ethics within that heart, that we call it, is absolutely essential if we want to make smart cities which are much more human oriented or ethical as well. And when we talk about ethical, of course, facets being whether I'm transparent to what I am actually doing at this point in time from an AI perspective, whether I'm explainable in whatever I put out my data. If typically people call neural networks are the black boxes, but can you have gray boxes or white boxes in some form or the other? So this has been largely researched. My ideology is essentially to bring up that thought to think that smart city is nothing more than a heart muscle. And we have to take care of the entire pipeline of that heart.
Thank you. You are a neuroscientist and you're talking about the heart muscle. You also seem to be a cardiologist. I think one of the things that we've not touched upon so far in this panel is about how technology can actually strengthen democracy. Because we've seen, how technology is playing about bringing information, but as well as bringing a lot of disinformation. And there's a report I was just reading somewhere which says that fake news actually travels 6 times faster than real news. And if that is the case, then there is a big challenge to democratic values going forward, which is about trust, which is about how you share data, which is about how you work with the digital divide, and how you actually use what we are calling as the logo for this, the tagline for this conference, which is for social empowerment. And all the time we talk about AI, we talk about smart mobility, we talk about smart, sensors or smart workplaces, smart homes, but we tend to forget the people behind it. And when you work in the cities, those are the people, the Ramesh the Ramesh, the Sita, the Kamlesh, or whoever you meet, they are the ones who make the city. How can we make AI empower them and empower our societies and empower our democracies? Something that we'll all also have to consciously speak about. I think we will hear a lot more on that with the future panelists. I now hand over to Ms. Prativa Mohapatra for her talk. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Kunal, and very enriching listening to all the prior panelists. So I'm from IBM, and we as a leading hybrid cloud platform and AI company, we have a singular focus of really accelerating the digital transformation for companies and for governments, right? And unlike Nikhil, I'm actually a practitioner. Me and my teams make people, okay, guys, the technology is there now, let's go and use it, let's make it real. And I was actually wearing the AI hat, trying to sell AI within IBM 3 years back. And it was very hard, and I called it AI tourism, right? Because people used to go, try, come back. But I think this entire pandemic has accelerated digitization and accelerated the use of this exponential technology. So it's a great time, and there's no going back. And I think AI, ML, any new technology takes about 10 years to mature. We believe about 2, 3, 4% of AI in real has been used. Next 3-4 years, maybe 25, 30% of AI, no more tourism. And then it's a 7-year, 8-year horizon till governments and organizations do real projects. So that's one. And me and my teams, as the hybrid cloud and AI platform providers, work with ecosystem players like some of the companies out here as well, and many of the ecosystem partners we had in the 5 days who work together to make it real, really. So that's where I come from. And all of you guys have spoken about the modernization and how the urbanization is creating the havoc. I mean, just 3% of the earth is covered by cities, but 60 to 70% of the entire energy consumption is done by these cities, and biggest cloud footprint. So how does it all pan out? And for our clients, for our governments to really adopt smarter cities, we say, okay, there are 5 systems in a smarter city. So there is stuff around the citizens, the people. There is stuff around the business, right? How you make a good business orientation for your city, right? In Gurgaon, I live in Gurgaon, so is it great to do start a business here? So the business aspect of it, the citizen aspect of it. Then there is a transportation system, how you make people travel. Then communication system, how do you make people communicate, right? Is the MCG having a portal or a chatbot or a Twitter? When I message, they immediately talk about it. So transportation, communication, citizens, business, and of course the general utilities. So these are the 5 systems in any city that every city owner, every city administrator should think of. And it is a play of these 5 systems of systems. If they really come alive, is when you give happy citizens and happy city. So, and we do have great frameworks around these 5 systems of systems, and each one can play. I mean, within citizens, you can have healthcare, you can have education, XYZ. So that's, again, a framework of how to make it real, right? Few examples, again, in India, to be honest, we have done agriculture stuff with Karnataka. We are trying to do some education stuff with Niti Aayog. But obviously, there are cities like, say, Jakarta Smarter City. We started 5-6 years back. They were getting this, chats, SMSs, all kinds of stuff, deluged with information, unable to figure it out. So that's where we went and put what we call our big data platform. So that's real. So now all the data comes in there. real insights, real actions, so making it real, right? Similarly, there's another example on transportation. I'll talk about Port of Rotterdam in Netherlands. Again, I think it's the largest port in Europe, and about 140,000 vessels come every year. Just the porting and landing costs are extremely high. So these guys really said, how do I digitize? How do I use AI, ML, IoT to make this more efficient? So they took about 50 kilometers of land and sea. Sensors were embedded to various vessels, various windmills, and that's when the data started coming in. The data of ship movement, data of wind, data of speed, all of that started coming in. And today, as we speak, these guys, for every 1 hour of berthing time, they save about $80,000. Again, use of IoT platform on cloud, scalable, real, right? And of course, there are many such examples of cities in China trying to do carbon footprint, again, through sensors and IoTs and all of that. One of the biggest platform, and I keep on saying platform because I guess that's where the basic has to be there and ecosystem guys have to plug in, right? And we have what we call the weather company. It's another big platform, 25 billion per day, personalized, actionable weather data is sent out, 25 billion. Imagine what can be done. It is available to anyone. I mean, whether Orissa wants to use it for cyclone predictions, or whether someone wants to use it for the sudden deluge of floods that we have, it's up to us, right? So that's a platform, and more of that is what we are going towards. Okay, and in all of that, then what is the future of technology? So I'll sort of summarize our perspective of how we see all of this coming in, right? And we did hear the speakers talking about various formats. One is engage. All the different technologies is how do they elevate the way we engage from mouse and to keyboard. Data capturing is happening through IoT and all of that. But data capturing will also happen by my hand movement, by gestures, by embedding stuff in my ears. So every technology, how are we elevating engage? So that's one big thing. Next is edge. We talked about, all this movement to cities, but why do we move people here? If technology moves to the edge, right? If things go to, and then that's real. By the way, whatever is on the screen, it's real. Edge computing is real. And we are at the front part of edge, so it's a full computing. It's basically taking the technology to the periphery, right? Hyper-connected society. So let's take the full little computer into that village. It's almost like that in that mobile phone. So it's edge. Everything is around edge. Third is quantum. We heard about model creations, different kind of models, but quantum computing will do, million times faster generation of a model, creating a relationship, finding these new discoveries. I mean, all this COVID stuff that we are hearing, all the discoveries with all the patterns. Quantum, again, which we as IBM are in the front runners there. This is what's going to change how fast we do actionables out of these models. And last but not the least, this entire thing about trust, which everybody has been talking. All the data in this world means nothing without context, without security, without transparency, and most of all, without trust. And this is not technology alone. Trust is about our data privacy rules. Go and watch Social Dilemma Netflix series to realize what we're talking about here, right? So I guess that's where I would like to leave it at.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you talked about very interesting things, and that's another framework of looking at AI. And we talked about how city officials, AI actually can be used to build capacity of city governments, also to connect people, so that open co-creation and open innovation can happen. And you touched upon platform thinking and open digital ecosystems. I think we would love to hear on those aspects from future speakers on this panel. So I'll just move over to the next speaker now, Dr. Sumit Chowdhury, CEO, SesoVera, Edge AI VoiceTech platform. So over to you, Dr. Chowdhury.
Thank you.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sumit, and I've been working in the smart city space in India for the last 5 years, right from the time when the mission got started. Had an opportunity to work across many cities, and what I'm going to talk about today is, as Prativa was saying, what is here and now, what is happening. There has been a lot of presentations through the whole session for the last 5 days, I think, talking about what can happen. But our cities today, our projects, and Kunal's mission, Smart Cities mission today, has actually implemented a lot of technology today in the cities. And I'll talk a little bit about what is happening, what are the challenges of what is happening, and how can we implement AI not just for solving these big world hunger type of problems, but embed it into the smallest of things and make it real for the man on the street. And it is happening. And what I'm going to talk about today is what is happening. Right? So if I take a look at the two companies that I represent, I represent Gaia and SesoVera. They both are companies that I formed after I left Geo as the president and CIO. So in SesoVera, we look at embedding AI on the edge, and Prativa talked a little bit about edge and everything going to the edge. We have realized that there is a lot of technology and a lot of intelligence that you can actually build in right on the smallest of things, and we give speech recognition and sensor pattern recognition on the edge on a very small form factor device. Different technologies used there. And on the Gaia side, which we have worked in the smart city space extensively for the last 5 years, we have a full cloud-based AI and a IoT platform, which brings in a lot of the data that people are talking about today, makes a sense of what is going on, and tries to figure out what are the actionables and what are we going to do. On one side, we are looking at perceptive decision making, very quick. What we say, we do right at the edge. And on the other side, you bring in data from a lot of different sensors, a lot of different contexts, and then try to find patterns, more cognitive, more thinking. So we have spanned both of these. My own background, right from my undergrad days to now, has sort of enabled me to play these roles. So the context of cities and data today, cities become smart because they are constantly measuring and improving themselves. And I think that is my definition of smart city that I have been using, that can you become a good measurement company, and can I measure everything that we are doing? And today, if I take a look at what is happening in the smart cities mission and all the cities, we are capturing a lot of data. Technology has been put in. And when we capture data today, we know what is not happening. Today, the level of analysis that is happening is very little. We capture, we know what is not happening, and we take a little bit of action because we know somebody else is also watching what is not happening. So we look at average performance management, and we do a little bit of analysis and saying who is doing well on that. We mostly are not taking too much action, and we'll talk a little bit about what we are doing and that taking action bit. Most of the time we can't do too much action in the current cities context in India is because what will our contracts allow us to do? And I think that's where we get stymied. So when we take a look at what can we do with the data and AI in the context of smart cities in India, we need to transform how we are structuring our contracts to sort of make this whole thing a lot more with the loops that Shailesh talked about, and also Nikhil and Prativa talked about. How do we create them? First, manual actions have to happen. And then once we understand what these manual actions mean and what is the impact that these manual actions are doing on the citizens, on the cities, on the efficiencies of the various departments, will we be able to automate some things? And the problem that we see is not having enough data to simulate this automated action, and I'll talk a little bit about it later. So when we look at sense, we see a lot of technologies in computer vision, audio processing that is coming and that is being implemented, smarter cameras, smarter sensors on the field to figure out what is happening in the field. Natural language processing and knowledge representation is happening on the comprehend side, and I've seen these projects in the field. And finally, when we look at action, we see people talking about and implementing machine learning and expert systems in the cities today. And if I take a look at the 16 areas that the smart cities are talking about today, from governance all the way to spaces, we are seeing high degree of intervention, digital and data interventions across health, sanitation, waste reuse, energy, transportation, water supply. People are sensing things. There are a lot of data being captured, but we still have to move the needle significantly when we want to look at the comprehend and the act on each of these areas. And if I take a look at the elements that have been implemented today in mobility, I think I have seen a lot of implementation of smart parking, where cameras are being used to figure out what spaces are available. I think that's where we see the most implementation. The rest of it is sensors. I don't think they have figured out in automating a lot of the transit operations, and fare collection is just simple systems. We are seeing a lot of implementation of traffic management and safety and surveillance and AI used in all of these things today. AI or just algorithms. I think people interchangeably use algorithms and AI and machine learning all bundled together into one concept. So we'll just go along with that flow. A lot of sensing is happening in the waste management, but not much of AI there. Water, I have seen a lot of projects being contemplated and being done across multiple cities to see whether we need sensors or we need AI to solve the problem. Maybe we need a bit of both. And to reduce the cost, I think the implementation of AI will actually be more feasible and make these business cases more viable. Today, we are seeing a lot of problems with viability of these projects because the amount of money it takes to implement the hardware in the last mile in India. So we are seeing cities and the governance and the consultants working in the cities veering more towards, do we have a smarter system which will actually use cheaper sensors and cheaper gadgets, but augment it with AI? And we are seeing the same thing across all the other areas of smart cities today. But if I take a look at these big, hairy problems, and saying AI is not just solving these big, hairy problems of world hunger, but it is being used in the most mundane situations in India. And I'll tell you a few of the very silly things we are doing, but they add so much value. I mean, today, across the entire Indian railways, we are using AI-based attendance capture. We are not using biometric. 15-20,000 people every day are getting captured through a camera using the cheapest mobile phones on the field. We are using AI algorithms to check whether they are there. And you'll be most surprised where people figure out how to beat that system. They have started using pictures of pictures. So we started implementing more complex AI to identify fraud. How do you do depth analysis? How do you do analysis across 10 different images that the person could have used in the past? And those are all implementation of complex AI algorithms to figure out India's problems. I think attendance and fraud using multiple ways to beat the system is a very Indian thing that happens. Not just Indian, I think it happens across the world. We are seeing this in multiple countries. We are also optimizing work allocated by work by people. A lot of layers of supervision can be automated by AI, and we are doing it today for the railways, for the cities, and also for the airports. We are trying to assist in removing layers of supervision using AI, because the decision making is very simple. Allocate people, allocate the right people at the right time, make sure there is no backlog. And as Shailesh was pointing out, there are different goals that an organization have: profit maximization, cost minimization. And we are using these simple goals that an organization have to allocate work. And these are not complex, but it is being used today. SesoVera, we are using voice recognition for customer feedback, for automating a lot of functions on the field. But the biggest issues that we see is that the data is captured, but it's not being used for decision making yet. We are seeing the analysis which is being done is very superficial and does not come anywhere close to any scientific rigor. And that we need to improve. Automation is not possible in most situations, and the change management on the ground level has been abysmal. We can start a project, but completing it, making sure everybody is using it, making sure the compliance and the capture keeps on happening, is what is going to make or break our process for making our cities smart. And the last thing that I wanted to leave you with is the biggest problems that we see of using data in AI. It's like water everywhere. There's not a drop to drink. There is a lot of data being captured, but they are not ready for AI training. I think this is something that we need to embed into the design of our programs, so that we can make this data ready for our cities to become smarter later, so that we can train our algorithms. Most applications of AI today fail because we don't have enough data to train the algorithms. We have data as input data, we don't have output data, and that's the correlation between input and output data. And finally, we have the problem, and this I leave with Kunal sir to address, is the procurement of AI and innovation in the government is very difficult. You can buy crores of billboard advertising in a heartbeat, but you cannot necessarily buy innovation and respect the intellectual property that goes along with it. I think there needs to be better mechanisms for the procurement of these across the various tenders that I'm seeing. So I'm going to leave it there and hand it over.
Thank you, Dr. Sumit. It has been it's been a wide canvas that you've tried to cover in short time. 2 or 3 quick points that I think come out from your thing is this focus on measuring and being able to deliver as per the needs of the city. You also talked about data being everywhere but not being used, which is where there is ample data that you think is there for the measurement to happen, but it's not happening. Which is where the data smart cities strategy that we've tried to create and working on people, processes, and platforms. We're trying to build, the expertise and the in-house capability within our cities. It's not going to be an easy task, but I think all of us working together will definitely reach where we want to go sooner than later. Of course, it's always going to be a journey. Also on procurement, yes, you're right. I think we need to innovate procurement to procure innovations. It's as simple as that. And then as soon as possible, we have to actually see that happens. Okay, so I'll move on to the next speaker. I think we have Mr. Harjiv Singh, who's the founder and CEO of Gutenberg, lined up next. Without further time, I would invite him to make his talk.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Kunalji, for the introductions. This is one of the most exciting topics, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, that by the end of the century, 80% of the world's population is going to live in cities. And my experience with smart cities comes from my work. I sit on the advisory board of a New York company called Global Futures Group, which actually hosts the Smart City New York event, as well as they do a lot of work with Barcelona, which was one of the pioneers in smart city conferences in Barcelona. As people who've sort of attended any of those conferences, has been one of the leading cities around how do you build it from a smart perspective. What I want to talk about really is the work I do on a day-to-day basis, where we help on our company side, help people and organizations design branding, thinking about the design part of how it affects humans. Every city is really about its citizens, and we have to keep that at the core of how we think about anything smart in a city, right? Is only as good as the intelligence of the people to work with digital technology and how they use that to better their lives, right? So there are 3 areas that matter a lot in this. Is the city livable? Is it workable? And is it sustainable? And while AI is an important sort of development in terms of technological change, we are still in the very early days. When you talk to, if you heard Vishal Sikka earlier in the week, who is the former CEO of Infosys and has a PhD in AI from Stanford, he talked about, we're still in a very early stage of how to think about data. And previous speakers have also alluded how we need to really think about how to frame this holistically. And I think the important part is, how do you create a human-centered, designed approach to creating smart cities and smart strategies for these cities? Because at the core of this are the people that are citizens in our countries across the board. I mean, I spend more than half the year traveling between a lot of the global cities. And the ones that come to mind when I think about smart cities are, livable, workable, and sustainable. And they are the ones that actually create the environment for the citizens to really engage with the environment around them. Because cities provide the environment that they're there. Excuse me. I want to quote one of the leading urban theorists, practitioners, and really one of the leading thinkers from the last century, Jane Jacobs. She says, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, but only when they are created by everybody. And that engaging the audiences, the citizens on how we frame our smart city strategies is a very important step. I'll give you an example. My own experience with India's smart city, or I'm in Delhi right now, was I know the government is using technology effectively because if in the last 3 months, I've got 5 challans that I never knew. I skipped something and they send me a photo of how I do this. Challans are tickets, a traffic ticket that I get automatically on my mobile and I have to pay that, which is fine. So as a citizen, my engagement with the city has been more on a penalization perspective rather than on, so how do I create that holistic environment where people can actually be really helped in terms of how they get better services and outcomes from their experience with living in a city. I know a lot of the data that we have seen around AI and smart cities, there's a lot more yet to be done. We're still at the early stages, and I think the opportunities are phenomenal. The way we think about it, how we frame that, how we package that from a strategy standpoint becomes very important. I think the citizen-centric mindset is what I want to sort of see if we could bring into anything that we implement from a technology perspective, because that's very important. And how you communicate with the citizens about those opportunities of how do you make them more digitally savvy? How do you create the data platforms that allow more economic growth and entrepreneurial access to these platforms to be able to do things? And I want to sort of close on one important point that Shailesh had mentioned earlier in his opening remarks, that data is sort of the grammar for the language of AI. But I want to use another example that some of the most perfect grammar in the world is the Sanskrit language, but if we don't speak it, that grammar is not going to get us anywhere. And we have to really understand that how people engage with data, how they consume, how they consume the services of a city or a state or a nation becomes very, very important. Is it actually solving our problems? There are areas like urbanization. India is going through this massive urbanization. If we can create an ability, and today with telecom literally reaching every household in the country, it gives us an opportunity to build on the foundation that the government has built on the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and the mobile platform that's there. The opportunities are there. I think we have to think holistically about the human-centered design piece to be able to do this. So I'll end on that note. I think citizens are at the core of any smart city. If we can make our citizens smart about how they engage technology, we will have the smartest cities in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. In fact, maybe the briefest definition of a smart city could be cities which actually keep their people at the center, and that's what you pointed out. And so when we talk about AI or technology for mobility, for water, for waste, we should actually be talking about AI for the elderly, for the children, for workers, for professionals, for students, and so on and so forth. And this probably will happen only by localizing, solutioning, by being able to create champions, which is another thing that I see as a problem in the current ecosystem, because we do not have the kind of professionals we need. There are people who are too seduced by technology and people who are too much of an urban, but we don't find the mix of technology and urban in between. And also we have people who get very fascinated with technology and people who know the people side of the thing. It's almost like we need hybrid technology where people and computers and people and AI can actually come together. And that's probably what, I think I read this book called Digital Nation by N. Chandrasekharan, the TCS person, and he's written really well about how probably a country like ours can actually think about deploying technology, which harnesses the potential of our population as well as give benefit to the citizens, just like you talked about, Harjiv. So, and the other thing you talked about is we have to use this grammar. And until we get over our fascination of governance-driven data, we actually move towards, how do we move towards data-driven governance?
Yes.
It's something that all of us do. And it's not something easy to get over because we've been, it's ideology which has taken a large, we have evolved with ideology. So it will take some distance of travel to actually go towards it. And there's a lot of trust and a lot of collaboration that needs to happen for that to happen. So you've given us great insights. Thank you so much. Now, in fact, we move to the Shashank Oja. Shashank, sorry to keep you waiting. I think I just skipped the schedule a bit, but nevertheless, he leads the digital team at World Bank. So lovely listening to you. I think you can bring in the a multi-country perspective to this talk. Over to you.
Thank you, Kunal. And first of all, thank you for this opportunity. Thanks to the organizers for this opportunity to participate. This was, I think, one of the most well-spent 1 hour, and the wealth of information was amazing. So thank you to all the speakers. This was amazing. I will actually speak about my own journey, and this has been, I've been working on the digital space, and especially in the urban space, for almost over a decade now, about 12 years. I was also the task team leader for the Digital India. It was called NEGP that time, National E-Governance Program. It was renamed as Digital India from the World Bank side. And one of the mission mode projects was in NEGP was urban and municipalities. But unfortunately, at that point of time, in NEGP and Digital India, not much was achieved because the ministry actually decided to take out that and do it under a different JNURM and other programs. So we missed that opportunity at that time. But from the bank side, we've been working very closely with the 3 states. And these are the, I think, only 3 states where 100% digitization of all the municipalities has happened. These are Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh. And we basically started with something very, very basic, where we created data centers and lands and in every municipality. And we used to, in Tamil Nadu, 136, we used to run from one change in software, and we used to run to 136 municipalities to make those changes. To a time now where last year we have done Andhra Pradesh on a cloud-based system, which is, the cloud is hosted in Mumbai, one of the best cloud service providers. And all 110 municipalities in Andhra Pradesh are working from a single source, a single instance. Sorry, instances have been created for each municipality, but just one single team which is working for all 110. Another very interesting thing which has happened is that we've been able to do the GIS mapping of all the cities, 110. We are doing the same for Tamil Nadu in 36 cities. And very interesting integration, what we are calling GeoPortal, where the GIS, the spatial data, is being now integrated with the non-spatial. There are 28 different modules for both the Tamil Nadu and Andhra. And we are where required, we are linking the spatial data. So every property is now linked to a spatial data. And the impact has been huge, unimaginable. We'd also not even thought about that. And every year in Andhra Pradesh for the last 3 years, the revenue from property tax has been increasing 100% because properties were missing. Now that we have the entire map of the city, we are, and linking it to the property database, we are finding out the missing properties, the discrepancies, the regularization, all that, and literally the revenues are. So one big challenge which our municipalities or cities face is about their, what we call own revenue. They're dependent on central government and state government grants. And that is something which, if you see globally, we've taken our smart city leaders to Korea, we've taken them to Japan, we've taken them to Europe. And everywhere you'll see that the cities have, the smart cities globally have grown organically. They have, because of their leadership. India is a unique situation where we have a top-down program. And nobody in the world has done 100 smart city program, except China now, which is actually copying India's initiative. So this is the size and scale of challenge in India. And how do we address it? So other than when I was talking about these 3 states, the digitization across the country has been It's not very, the variation is very, very disappointing. There are some municipalities who are really at the top and they know what they're doing, and because of the leadership and the capability of, but otherwise, if you see the level of the core capabilities at this is the third level of governance, the central government, the state government, and this other. So city governments and the panchayats are the third level. The core capabilities are very, very limited. And there are very exceptional cities who have been in. So implementing technology at that third level of governance has been a huge challenge. And we have cities which have even not done basic digitization. So where do we get this data from? So that the scale and the speed at which we have, that is, I'm quoting Kunal now. I think since Kunal has come on this, our discussion on this topic has really moving at a very fast pace. He's a unique person who comes with a background of what municipality is and what he has been able to showcase in his prior assignment, and now his understanding of how it can be implemented nationwide. So it's not about only 100 smart cities now. We are now talking about 4,400 plus cities across the country. So that will be some kind of a basic level of digitization. And then what Kunal and team are talking about is that 100 smart cities should become more like a pilot and should be more like a lighthouse and guidance for the other cities. So that is very, very important, that when we talk about technology, there is a maturity curve. And we have to move from very basic, even the best, some of the best like Andhras and Tamil Nadu have moved through this maturity. We can take a big jump and leap into, but I think still that basics will have to be learned and those foundations will have to be built. So that is one very, the scale and the capabilities are a big issue. And the problems which you have addressed, I think most of the speakers mentioned that we've moved from 30% to 45%. And as per UN estimates, we are heading to something like 60 to 65% urbanization within a decade or so. So this is the kind of challenge which we have to address. And this is the opportunity, a very small window of opportunity. And if we don't do it now, I think we'll miss the bus again. So we cannot afford to do that. And we have to all come together to see how we address this and at least define these various levels of maturity and how do cities proceed on this path. From our point of view, it's not just technology. The bank defines smart cities in a very different way. We come from the UN side of it. You all may be aware that the UN adopted the SDG agenda. And SDG has these three pillars, which were earlier we were only talking about economic growth. Now we have three pillars. We're talking about economic growth as one pillar. The other one is the environment and the climate. And the third one is the inclusiveness. With this urbanization trend, we are finding poverty, which was earlier a rural phenomena, has becoming urban poverty is becoming a big. And we have seen in the COVID how the migrant workers and the people who are the people in the slums and the people who didn't have even the basics, they were the most affected. And how do we address these challenges? I think this is where we need to come in. So that's the inclusiveness pillar. And when we have done our GIS map, we found that all these slums and irregular colonies are actually missing from the master plan. We don't even think about in town planning. So those are challenges. They are also part of the city habitat. And we somehow miss with whether we are trying to create the infrastructure or trying to provide services or job opportunities or transportation or water. We just don't even think about them because they are not in the master plan. The second definition, which is the four pillars which we, and I think I'll not go into it, I'll just mention them, that we need to have smart people. We need to have smart infrastructure. We need to have smart governance, and we need to have financial strategies. I think the earlier speaker mentioned about sustainability as a very important piece. The financial sustainability of this effort and how the cities sustain is also very important, and so is important in terms of the technological solutions. And lastly, what we are saying is that in terms of applying these technologies to these problems, I don't think item by item, for example, IoT or for example, AI or cannot be individually done, which we have been doing till now. We've been actually building these technologies into specific applications. We need to, I think Prativa mentioned that we need to move on to the platform approach. That's where the world is moving. And we need to build these platforms where the bottom layer is the data layer, where we are able to collect all types of data from IoT to laptops to mobiles to all levels of sensors and so on. Build the second layer as technology pieces, where all these technologies are made available as technology engines. And the third layer are specific problems, smart water, smart mobility, and so on, and allow all different agencies who work in a specific city to come share the data and work together and innovate. Not only the government agencies, but also researchers, universities, and startups, and everybody should come together, collaborate and co-create and solve the problem. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Shashank, you have great experience, and that reflects. In fact, one thing that you highlighted is the overall larger issues of urban governance that impede our performance in the world of technology. And it's no wonder that we still call our urban local bodies. We don't call them urban local governments. And that's the big mindset change that needs to happen. Of course, it's not only a problem of mindset, it's a problem of structure. I think we will evolve. We're evolving towards that. 74th Amendment did come in, and then subsequently we've seen
we are moving towards
yes, we are moving towards that. It's just the pace that has to pick up. I'll stop here, and then I'll invite the last speaker for the day, of course, followed by question answers. And don't forget, we'll have a video demo at the end. So please hold on till the end of the session. We have Dr. Jayant, founder and MD of Nayan Technologies. Over to you, Dr. Jayant.
Thank you so much, Kunal. It's very much appreciated. And I think since I am technically the youngest, I believe, in the group, and arguably the most inexperienced, I think I want to take a more hands-on approach to the discussion. I think I would start to quote a very famous quotation by our Honorable Prime Minister of India itself, Shri Narendra Modi ji. He mentioned once, many years back, he said, "मेरे लिए राजनीति महत्वाकांक्षा नहीं है, बल्कि एक निरंतर अभ्यास, परिश्रम और मिशन है." And I remember these words because it applies to technology directly. It is technology development हमारी महत्वाकांक्षा नहीं है, बल्कि भारत की आत्मनिर्भरता, आत्मसक्षमता and आत्मसम्मान हमारा मिशन है. How do we achieve technology should fulfill the last three directives of the country. So with that, I want to dive into slightly more practical issues related to smart cities. If you can all see my screen, the objective for smart cities as at its core is actually a mission that is not the government's mission. It is not the government's responsibility entirely to make cities smart. Hand in hand, it should also be a governance / public participation jointly to achieve smart cities. And just briefly, we've worked with numerous police departments, governments across the country. We've come to a realization that at an example, and I will start with an example. Smart cities in general are a mechanism for the cities to be able to monitor not only infrastructure, allow connectivity, allow development, quick reaction times for emergency responses, and so many things that go with a very smart city sort of a network. The traditional way of doing things, and but I'll walk you through a very solid presentation at the end of what we are doing. Want to address one example of a city, which is monitoring. The traditional way of doing it is through CCTV cameras. And arguably, it has been good, but it is not sustainable. The expense, the maintenance, and the provision to deploy so many of these is arguably a little bit tough. So giving an example, this is an example scenario. And since we are talking smart cities, I will talk about one of the biggest pain problems of India. It's massively huge traffic. And we are growing at a 17.2% annual growth year on year in terms of traffic. Population is scaling larger than any other country. Will probably be the highest population density country very soon. Cities, as Shashankji and Prativa also mentioned, they are becoming even more dense. They are getting dense by the hour, by the day. People are moving to cities, and it is something we need to think about very importantly, very fast. It is going to go out of hands soon. So this is a traditional example of monitoring and understanding how roads are moving, how traffic is moving. And traffic are the bloodlines of the country. They supply not only goods across cities, they supply people to work and back. They are the ways that we provide emergency response to public hazards. So quintessentially, the most important thing is the roadway network of the country. It has to be smooth. And we are monitoring it using officers, which I'll take the example of Delhi because it has the largest police deployment on the field. Arguably, some of the most efficient police officers are manning Delhi roads, and some of the most respected people, very hardworking. And I work with them, so I know. And the traditional way is in front of you. And I believe Mr. Sumit also, I believe, mentioned someone that they got traffic tickets while driving on the roads. So if you look at this situation, what happens is the CCTVs are on barracks, and they're monitoring roads. And in some cases, you will see that the limited field of monitoring is only this tiny region. But if you look at an entire freeway or entire roadway, it's huge. How do you get from monitoring such small areas to monitoring a full city is a paradigm shift of thought. So not copying Western tech, purchasing it and deploying it in an Indian environment, thinking Indian problems is what we need to think about. So a simple deployment, how government can actually use people to help monitor roadways. This is an example, and it's already live, and I'll give you a demo at the end of my talk. Use people's devices. The CCTVs are heavy, expensive, maintenance heavy, and deployment is slow. Tenders and all. A typical example, and Shri Nitin Gadkari, I gave a presentation to him. He included a lot of amendments in Motor Vehicle Act, very high respects to him. A lot of effort has gone into the act. And so this is an example of a typical scenario where bikes, cars are actually monitoring the roads. They provide free installation. There is no cost to the government. There is no infrastructure layout. There is no networking, no tenders involved. This is happening live, and you can get free information from people's help now within 5 minutes of your request coming in. Another example of a red light. Thousands and thousands of red lights exist in Delhi alone. Monitoring them through cameras continuously is a Western approach. That is what the West does efficiently because of the limited traffic, because of the limited infrastructure, maintenance requirements, and discipline in general. Population is low. How do we do it in India? Let's look at it from the top view. This is the traffic in India at every red light. They don't follow lanes. They are all over the place. Thousands and millions of cars. How do you monitor them? Police cannot do it. How many cameras can we erect? So applying a simple paradigm shift, just a change of thought. That's it. Instead of monitoring using CCTVs, go like the army does. They deploy cannons, which are the CCTVs. And they deploy foot soldiers, which are the people of India, to monitor the country, to help regulate the country, infrastructure issues of the country. I'll give you a mind-boggling number today. just through analysis over the last many years on dealing with only Delhi. I will give you the numbers. On the bottom right, you will see this is a typical deployment of CCTV cameras and one highway camera costing around 1 crore rupees in deployment. This is a typical tender cost. This area is 1/100th the cost of South Delhi. South Delhi, all in all, is 1/100th the cost, 100 the size of Delhi. All in all, 10,000 increase of this cost. The cost comes to about 10,000 crore to put these many number of CCTVs to cover 1% of Delhi. Now, what do CCTVs do? As the gentleman from Ola as well as IBM mentioned, CCTVs are useless without the ability to monitor them. If you are not monitoring them, they are just dead assets. They don't do anything. The cost to monitor CCTVs, just the cost to monitor CCTVs, is approximately 10 lakh crore rupees in manpower. So all in all, we are looking at around 11 lakh rupees in cost to monitor 1 to 2% of Delhi. Manpower, tech, maintenance involved, everything total. This is not possible. This exceeds a lot of GDP numbers, and this is hard math. There's nothing hiding. Math is very simple. Expanding that view, so what we need to start thinking is, how do we start thinking smartly? So smart cities in general are a incubation of both the people and the government together. So just to give leaving thoughts, this is not just one problem. The problems are everywhere. There are traffic problems, there are deaths, fatalities, there are illegal traffic, there are garbage dumps, there are road issues. There are so many other problems in every city. How do we go about solving all of them? Monitoring is very essential. So the power of smart cities, in conclusion, is in its people as well as the government together, not just the government on one side, people on the other side. So just my final thoughts. And I think we are doing a great service by including AI. AI has the potential. And so I conclude by saying that it is a joint mission, not just one-sided. Thank you again. Thanks, Kunal.
Thank you, Jayant. Lovely insights. In fact, you're the youngest, but you gave us very good insights. Your age is, so you're doing great work. So the point that's coming out of your discussion is that it's there has to be a government which is able to do the right things with technology. The capacity needs to be there, which is where I probably now want to circle back to Dr. Shailesh. He's on the call. He talked of something called ecosystem intelligence and using ecosystem intelligence. And I think Dr. Sumit talked about something similar, and this need for measure the city and then take action accordingly. Is it very simplistic to think that a city can be modeled, the entire ecosystem of a city can be modeled to be able to do that? Otherwise, if you make some simplistic model and you end up taking decisions on a simplistic model, it should not happen that you actually ruin something, or maybe take. That's always lurking in the back of your mind. The other thing, when I think of it, and since I lead the smart cities thing, and there are hundreds of practitioners wanting to implement technology in the cities, there is no, it's almost like a logi of technology which is needed. There's no sense of how to practice technology. There are people who tell about technology. There are people who do urban governance, but there's no one who tells how to practice technology. In the startup world, you will have a lean startup saying you test, learn, scale. How do government officers, how do city managers, if you call them, learn to work on technology? What are the first steps they should be taking in the lines of test, learn, scale? So I'll talk with Dr. Shailesh first, and because this is something my city managers would be waiting to listen to, and anyone else can also add on to that. So, Dr. Shailesh, please.
Yeah, so I think the way AI works effectively is when we combine data with domain knowledge. And I think people who have a lot of domain knowledge, if they start talking to people who understand how to apply AI, and you lock them up in a room for a couple of days, and then the magic will happen. And I think that discussion is not happening. AI people are building algorithms on one side, domain knowledge people are trying to come up with rules and regulations on one side, but this marriage of data and domain knowledge is essential, because the key element in AI is the art of formulation, right? How do you formulate the metrics correctly? How do you formulate the objective functions correctly? How do you formulate the feature engineering correctly? And what kind of models do you use, right? And what kind of sensors, like Jan talked about, do you use, right? So I think there is a well-defined template of how to deploy AI in any domain, and that is not missing. What is missing is people coming together and understanding the template from both angles and saying, these are the metrics, we clearly write them down, we can measure them or not, what data do we collect to measure them, right? And we can measure everything. So this measurability is the first step. And then, how do you kind of then start to think about, what are the bottlenecks, how to implement all the different variations so that we can improve those metrics, right? So domain knowledge, metric thinking, data thinking, the stimulus data, what all is there, how can we make our sensors cheaper, how can we make the interpretation more on joint, as opposed to individual optimization. Just one example, if all of us are commuting, trying to optimize our own commute time and our own commute, then we are going to have a very bad optimization. But if all our cars are optimized correctly simultaneously, we'll have a global optimization. This is ecosystem thinking. And I think, we think of AI at multiple levels. So currently what we are talking about is a very low level AI, right? Interpreting data and this and that. But I think we need to keep raising the bar, because the challenges are at the next level, which is how do you do reasoning over the whole city? How do you do prediction at a joint level, right? How do you optimize in a joint way? These are next level problems that nobody has solved today. And yes, we have to, technologically we have to get there, but the starting point is, lock up the domain experts and the data scientist in a room, and then see what magic comes out. But there is a template, and it looks very complicated, but there is a template. And we have solved it in many other industries. And smart city is one more. It's far more complex, but it is going to be the same template that I think will work here. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'll,
So, uh,
if I can. Hmm.
please go ahead.
So, but what we have seen, I mean, I work with the city of Agra, as you know. We have deployed a full AI-driven workforce management for all the city employees who are dealing with day-to-day citizen problems, water supply problems, sewage, garbage problems. The city is an event-driven city now. An event happens. An event could be anything from the sensors which are giving the data, or people telling us. People are great sensors. We need to enable people to tell us what is happening. And as I think Jayant also pointed out in his speech, that there is a lot of data out there to collect from the people who are out there at no cost. So people are telling us that I need this service and this is my problem. You don't even need to define it. They'll tell you what the problem is. And then you need to allocate that work efficiently with your people, because cities are limited people. And you asked a question about how do you train your people to actually deploy it. You have to sit down with them, as Shailesh said. You have to work with them. Give them very simplistic user interfaces. AI is very complex. We don't need to tell them it's all driven by AI. You need to give them the simplest mobile phone interface where they will open up and do the 2 things that they need to do. They don't need 15 things. It's a complicated system. They don't need to know all the setup and all the things that we did in the back. They need to open the system and see the 6 things that they need to do and click on the 5 buttons that they need to click on. And every individual user need to have their customized user interface. It is a mass customization of user interfaces which enable deployment of systems very easily in people at the grassroots level. My users are cleaners of trains. They are using our systems happily because we have told them only 3 things to do. Press this button, press that other button, take your picture and send that other button and do this other thing. Can be trained in any language. So the deployment needs careful user interface design and not very complex thinking. The whole city can never be modeled, but we need to model small things put together.
Yeah. So taking up from your point, and I'll go to Nikhil. I want, 3. So let's say, as Dr. Shailesh is saying, we we are able to lock these people in a room, and let's say we're able to give them the system that Dr. Sumit is talking about, which are the possible 3-4 quick wins that our cities can look at, potentially by using AI and technology to really make a difference? So, Nikhil, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm there. Yes, Kunal. Yes. So,
any thoughts on this quickly? What they can do here?
No, I think as they rightly mentioned, the first attempt that Dr. Shailesh and Dr. Sumit is saying is block them in a room and put them through a process of design thinking, which is essentially saying that if we can a kind of an empathetic map of what they want to do. But some quick wins that they can definitely is essentially get them to, and this is get them to essentially practice and get some of that data to be shown on these devices, some kind of a value add, whether it's getting a sensor data from your weather, whether it's a temperature data, somewhere or the other, they have to see this. This is something that we are also doing with the government, where we're essentially working with the farmers. The idea is, what do they really want at the end of the day? I want to have my soil health. I want to understand what's the weather and the precipitation. I want to understand what are the reservoirs which are closest to me, etc. So some of the quick wins for us would be, what are we looking at as the objective function for them? Number one, in sense of, are you looking at solving a waste problem? Are you looking at solving a traffic problem? Are you looking at solving a kind of a sewage problem? So we divide those values, and based on that, we essentially present them on a piece of mobile phone or PC or whatever they may be the interface. The value of data coming out in a format which is much more adherable to them, which is saying that if this is the small portion, and just to allude to that first question that you mentioned was, we do not need to model the entire city. We can model a small road as well. And we can say these two sensors kept on a road will give you this temperature, this pressure, this weather, and this is the amount of traffic flowing through. This is how you see it on a piece of a graph. That is what, you've got both the measures of analytical data as well as a graphical input. When they start realizing the importance that this data has a value and they see that result out in the real life, I think that's where the value of AI or value of analytics really comes to them. I think those would be the quick wins as per.
Just to add to that, just to add to that.
So I'm coming to you. I'll ask the question. You can add this point on that question's answer. So I was going to ask you is that, there's actually a participant who's also asking the same question. He's asking whether, we need to use AI at all. In some places we are using them. Are we overdoing it? So the question is actually about, what you read these days, that this is the new age Malai. Malai, Doodh ki Malai. This is like machine learning and AI adds to your valuations. And therefore everybody talks of AI, whether it's actually AI or not AI, you don't know about it. And are we overdoing it also? Is it too much of a infatuation with technology? So what do you see from the business side of it? And how do city managers and people decipher whether it's a hammer chasing a nail, or is it the other way around? Is it a problem chasing a solution, or a solution chasing a problem? Because they would like a solution to chase a problem, but most of the times it's problem chasing a solution. So with that question and your insight on the previous one, please go ahead.
Yes, so both are linked, and what, as you rightly said, everybody was jumping into the bandwagon of, okay, let's do AI project, or 3 years back, let's do cloud. Now, when you started moving to cloud, you realize that beyond a particular type of workloads, cloud doesn't work when your business need for security, business need for XYZ doesn't happen. So then people retraced, let's restart. AI is something similar, because, as everybody says, data is a feeder. So a very clear thought process is, do I have the right data to achieve that outcome that I'm looking for? So first pause. And what do we call the AI ladder, right? Because the first step is collecting the data, right? You have a business goal in mind. I will solve the issue of overloaded vehicles minimization, or now for that problem to solve, think back. And I think you mentioned design thinking. What are the 5 things, 10 data elements you need to actually solve that problem? Then sit back. That is a data collection. Do I have those elements? Do I know how they will be collected? So collect, then organize, then analyze, then infuse into that process. So doing AI projects often involves a lot of changing the process itself. So
if I put you on the spot and I ask you what percentage of AI companies are actually doing it for just valuations, and what percentage are actually doing it for a real solution seeking? So, I mean,
one is AI companies, how much AI infusion they're doing into their products versus organizations adopting AI to solve a business problem. I think product companies which are infusing AI now, they're much higher percentages rather than the corporates who are trying to, or the government, the agencies who are trying to, इस process में AI डाल दो. It just cannot happen. Because have I thought out that end process that I'm trying to bring intelligence into? And if that process, if that is a flow, actually the same flow will not give intelligence. Maybe I change the flow and then back it out by what are the 5 data elements. Hence, it is a ladder. And then people talked about journey, AI journey. It's rather kind of, it's all about data. So first, the 10 right data elements. Am I collecting it right? Am I organized? And they all often say there's no AI without IA, which is there is no AI without a right information architecture, right? So there's no AI without IA. So do I have the right information architecture? So that is why the role of the chief data officer, even in a smarter city initiative, you have to have a chief data officer, somebody who thinks that whether I have the right raw material. So that is where the entire thing is. And this chief data officer then can educate the managers, as you talked about, as to
what we would like.
Kunal, if I may, sorry. So this is a paradoxical conundrum. I don't think people are trying to use AI just because of the heck of using AI. I think what is happening is at every organizational level, there are elements of design thinking coming in, and people normally start with a smaller problem. They say, let's solve this at a problem. The rate at which data is being generated and the rate and the sensors and the amount of electronics that is generating typically lands at a place when you can't fathom the kind of relationship that you might do with that data. Now, typically, if you go to an AI school and you come to us and we say, if your relationships are managed, and if you can know the two relationships, please don't apply AI. Please apply a normal RDBMS system. Please apply a normal analytics on top of it. But slowly and slowly, as you start gathering data, and typically in terms of smart cities, and Jayant would know this because he's collecting a lot of data from on the ground. But the ideology really becomes this, after a while, this conundrum starts happening. Now, how do you fathom the relationship between different formats of data? So you have to go back to the analytic algorithms and AI. The second paradoxical conundrum happens. Do I now believe in the result of the AI? And that's where a large corporations today are. When we talk to our corporations and we essentially give them a problem solved through an AI, the resultant is about 70% of the people say, why do I believe in this result? Now, how do you prove that? A large percentage of AI is a lot of black box, but we have patterned a lot of data through it. It has gone through, it has made a model, and it has really resulted out. So there are approaches to this. I think my suggestion, and that will be like, I know Prativa would have the same suggestion working in IBM, would be essentially to say that what is the problem you want to solve? And it's an incremental hierarchy that goes in. Solve the problem with only analytics first, or try and solve it, bringing out the relationship. Unless and until it's a big problem, like a traveling salesman problem, if people say, you can't really solve it with a small amount of data. Go ahead and apply AI on top of it to say what you can achieve as a result. And then look at your precision and say, do I now know that this data really gives me the output that I was looking for? And if you're okay with that, stop it right there, bound it in a domain, and put ethics on top of it. I think that's the way to essentially proceed towards an AI project.
Oh, that's really a good thing. I've noted it down. In fact, this is something that I'll talk to my city officials with, because this is something that they really worry about, and it's a good way of looking at it. I will go now to Harjiv, and I'll take over from the point that Dr. Sumit made. He was saying that you don't need to tell complex things to city managers. Tell them these 3 buttons, these 3 programs, and let them work with it so that they're able to catch on with it. And the point that you made, Nikhil, is about this black box thing and people not believing in it. And imagine magnifying this to the entire city of, say, 6 million people, and they don't believe in it. And how do you actually go ahead and employ, even a small solution if that's the case? So this black box thing is actually very worrying. In fact, in one of the conferences, we were debating and someone made this point that technology is like riding a tiger. And if you slip, the tiger will have you. Otherwise, you can tame the tiger and you make, because that's too much of power in your hand. Now, I would like, because he was talking about people all the time, and I love that conversation that he began. It was just slightly different from what we talked about in the other session. How do we guard against, let's say, the three biggest warning signs? Which are those, and what is it that we should guard against when we're using technology at this scale in cities? So, Harjiv, can you come in with that?
Sure, Kunalji, thank you. I think the way to think about data and technology from a governance perspective is, can we make them like Lego blocks that are given to citizens, to businesses, to other stakeholders within a city, that they can build on top of it, right? You give a child a box of Lego, they'll come up with, there's 20 kids in a room, they'll come up with 20 different ways to actualize what their imagination is, allowing them to think and play with that. And I think to your earlier part of how do you bring your cities, the civic managers within these cities to come up with something that allows them to sort of help engage with what Sumitji was saying, in Agra, make it simple. It has to be thought through from people's perspective. And the way to do that is, I think, really, if I take just from the government as a stakeholder within the entire ecosystem, there are things that the government does, right? There is sanitation, there's transportation, there is education, health. Within each of those, develop multi sort of dimensional thinking by bringing them, even in a city like Delhi, we have RWAs, which are very powerful and they engage in a civic sense. Can we sort of think of how do you create the building blocks for something which even Prativa mentioned, right? The information architecture under these broader themes and how that connects with each other. Because at the end of the day, I may be a health expert or I may be a tech expert, but I need to be able to understand how the other stakeholders engage with that. And I think understanding that holistic thinking, I say, the Lego box is my perfect metaphor for this, because if we can create that, you will create a lot of new innovation on top of these Lego blocks of both architecture and how does it have interoperability with it, right? The reason we have smartphones that work is because there were standards that were set, right? I mean, in the early days of the pre-smartphone, there was a very different way of sort of everybody, you had more operating systems than you needed. Today, we've come down to sort of 2, 3, which are sort of mostly used, between iOS and Android. How do you create that connectivity between these systems is, I think, a fundamental thing. If we can solve for that, a lot of the creation will happen on top of it. And that's the piece I think we should keep in mind.
Yeah, even despite that, I struggle with the chargers. You have one USB-C type, the other is a USB-B type, there's other iPhone has its own thing. Yeah, but the point you're making is standardization. I'd be glad to tell you that maybe by the end of November, we will be coming out with the first version of smart city standards for our country.
Fantastic.
We just wanted the practice to actually come to a certain point and then come with the first level standards. And the point you're making is very valid. Don't think of an end state in the first day. Build like Lego blocks and build gradually and in a safe way and as per need. So that's a very important takeaway. I'll go to Shashank, and this will be probably the last question, and then I'll hand over to Jayant for the demo, which will be the last part of the session tonight. So Shashank, you talked of inclusive development, and we have a big digital divide in our country. And this talk of AI and use of technology in a world where we've seen winner takes all syndrome, where somebody who's good at technology, companies who are good at technology, people who know are part of the knowledge economy are doing much, much better than the other part of the economy. How do you see it panning out, and what should be a country like us and maybe cities in our country do to guard against this digital divide and this haves and have-nots distance not increasing further? And the best it actually should decrease. Is that even possible? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, and very important question. we've been trying to look at some technology solutions for this. And I think it's very interesting because, for example, when we apply some of these AI algorithms on GIS maps, we are able to identify some of these areas which are not serviced. You are able to get this information from the system where the network of the system is not available. You are able to then devise, for example, in Tamil Nadu, once we found out that these are the colonies which are not being serviced through water network, they immediately, I think they hire something like 1,000 actually, plus 1,200 water tankers, which by 7 in the morning actually go to these localities and they deliver water. We are able to find out where we don't have facilities, where they can actually go and for the toilets and sanitation services. And immediately the government was able to respond with community toilets and a very innovative idea where one side is a whole lot of toilets and actually that entire thing is used and around, I think, 50 meters away through pipelines, we have gas which has these gas chulas, which are community kitchens, which are actually being fed from these community toilets. So once we have this kind of information, we are able to get very innovative ideas from people in the domain. And I think somebody was just mentioning, I think Dr. Shailesh was mentioning that we have to bring the domain and the technology people together. Once they start sitting on the same table and start talking, a lot of these very innovative things come out of it. Very interesting, when we started, we found that satellite imagery was very expensive and getting it done on a regular basis is very difficult. We started using drones, very high image drones, and using some algorithms where they tell us now from the imagery, where is the garbage, where are the broken roads, where are the extensions. It's amazing the kind of, once you have the 110 municipality data in your one single database, you are able to do things which are amazing in terms of, and once you find a solution in one municipality, you are able to apply it to all 110. The other very interesting model was that why some of them are able to generate these better revenue models and the others are not. And the AI engine was able to find out what are the right things some of the municipalities are doing. And then we are able to apply it to the larger as good practices. So I think that is the inclusiveness part of it. And I think this is very important. For example, even in Delhi now, which is the heart of, I think last election, the big item of election item was the 1,750 unauthorized or irregular colonies. So if that is the situation in Delhi, I think the other cities have a very, very big problem of it. And these people, there are these migrants and these people are nowhere in the system. And how do we bring them in the system? And those are big challenges, which hopefully AI, which takes data from Facebook, all kinds of databases, and we are able to identify and address those issues.
The essential building block for AI is actually data. And if data itself has biases and is imperfect, it will get carried on and maybe accentuated into AI-driven systems, which is where we have to guard against. And which is where the tagline for this conference is responsible AI for social empowerment is so, so important. And I think we should leave it with that big message in mind, that it's all good, but there's also too much of bad which can happen. But that's the same with everything, every new technology. The same technology which created a cure for cancer actually created the atom bomb. So there's always a flip side to everything. It's how you maximize the positive and minimize the negative. That's going to be the challenge before us going forward. And in the interest of the people that Harjiv talks about and all of us talk about, and we have to keep them at the center. So It's been a fascinating discussion and question answers. I'll pause here because I have been told there's a very interesting video which Jayant wants to show. Jayant, we're 10 minutes away from wrap up time. I hope your video will keep time so that it's Friday evening and people will, not get mad after the moderator for keeping them longer than 7 p.m. So over to you, Jayant, for the video.
Jayant, you're on mute.
Yes. Oh, I see. Okay. Am I good now? Am I audible now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. So I was briefly mentioning that the video was showing the plight of cities in general because of congestion. And if somebody forgot how it felt to be on the roads under COVID, that is how we felt on the roads, and a lot of people feel on the roads to date. Issues from all over the place. And I'll give you my personal story. The time of founding Nayan, I was still in the US, and I took up driving Uber for nearly 14 to 16 hours every day. I wanted to understand what a poor man feels on the roads of the country, how a poor person feels in living in a country, city with minimum income, and how does he sustain himself? How do we solve for the country when we don't even know what a poor person feels like? So I gave up all my credit cards for 3 months. I had earned nothing except Uber money, and I lived my rent, insurance, everything on my Uber earnings. And this is my actual car. I had only one asset and a rented apartment. And I used it, put it on the field, and I earned a very good score. And in fact, I became the highest earning Uber driver in the city of Atlanta on the East Coast. I was grossing around $2,500 every month. And this was nothing except sheer hard work to earn money because I could not pay my rent. I could not pay for my basic McDonald's burgers. At times, I had to sleep in the car so I can pick up people in the night. I wanted to feel the pain of a country which is poor, has the poorest of people trying to meet daily ends, hand to mouth. Without understanding the pain, there is no solution. So solution came from this, looking at people, daily people. I had so many people picking fights with me, crying, calling me names. I traveled all the neighborhoods from the worst to the best. I found all the issues on the roadways, all the issues everywhere. I finally came to an understanding that actually the cities are not getting monitored. They're largely the technology, even in the West, is simply this, a CCTV camera looking at the roads. That is it. So crimes, roadway accident, 1 million deaths in the US alone, it is unimaginable. There are a lot of things, and this is the only recourse, with police, of course, on the roads. But so how do we solve for the country of India at the magnitude of India? The realization came, well, the biggest asset of India, what is it? The biggest asset of India is its people. If we start thinking about people as a problem, but people as an asset, solution is in front of us. That is when Nayan came about, and we figured that the one thing that every person in the country has is a smartphone. And the technology behind smartphone is the most advanced. So we came up with an application that allows anyone on the roadways to download an app simply and make a living daily. 24/7, all you need to do is install the app on your dashboard and drive your car. I'll give you an example and try to detect the problems on the roads now. So watch the video, find all the problems on the road as you see the video. This is your time to shine. So find all the problems that you see on the road. And then I will show you the power of AI and what we see as Nayan. This is a 10-second video of a typical AI frame that our cameras capture. We caught more issues in 10 seconds than people will catch in days. And the power of data collection is so immersive, so fantastic, that the only way to step ahead and keep faster than the growing population of our country is deploy tech at the lowest of levels at fastest of paces. Let's move forward. We have conquered, if you go on nayan.co, I'll let you see it. But we've captured more violations through AI, more issues on the roadways through AI than governments capture in weeks and months. We've been doing POCs with multiple cities. The power is immense. I'll give you another video of this thing, since I promised no flowcharts, only videos.
India is the jewel of the world. Increase in transport requires more monitoring.
It's the vision of Nayan, what we hope to achieve in smart cities.
Presenting the patented artificial intelligence system, Nayan. Thousands of cameras can help police act fast, decisively. Police cars, taxis, Uber cars, buses, trucks can support the India police to monitor the city. Nayan will analyze existing video from CCTV, police cars and mobile cameras. Illegal parking, bad roads, dangerous driving, garbage and more can be found. Citizens can now support the police. Drivers, trainees, school children of different age groups, elderly people. Intelligent data and smart connectivity. Emergency response can be sent quickly. Police can be deployed quickly. Driving scores of all citizens are submitted tremendous visual presence of the decision-making bodies on the ground. Safety and security to all citizens. India's infrastructure can see smart improvement.
So if you see, I'll show you exact Delhi, and we've actually now expanded to multiple cities in India. This is the place of Delhi, and starting with one Uber driver, myself, we are now hundreds of Uber and Ola drivers, Swiggy, Zomato drivers, every driver, trucks, auto buses, and we are helping capture road issues and presenting them to the right people. We have, these are a lot of statistics on nayan.co. Our hope is to use hundreds of people, thousands of people, and have benefit millions and crores of people. This is what we hope to achieve for all of India, smart monitoring to achieve smart city success. Next step is the world. We've already expanded to a few countries outside of India as well. And what we aim to achieve now is simply, this is our current system in action across a few cities.
India is the jewel of the world. The most densely populated and biggest democracy in the world. Increase in economy, popularity also comes with the price of increased population and traffic. Presenting the patented artificial intelligence system Nayan. Intelligent video data is sent to companies and government bodies directly. Public-private partnership and government partnership to achieve state-of-the-art security and safety for India. Integrating and processing all existing resources of India's government and business partners. Nayan will analyze existing video from CCTV, police cars and mobile cameras. India government and businesses want to ensure that India is the safest country in the world. People's safety and security is the #1 concern of Indian authorities. The city and authorities are working hard to make sure that daily life danger and traffic issues are fixed. Presenting the newest technologies for citizen safety and prosperity. The Nayan technology will work with police systems, governments, and provide state-of-the-art performance for private and public players. The country wants to make sure that vehicles are driven safely and do not cause danger to others and danger to themselves. The police want to make sure people are comfortable and can drive stress-free, and bad driving can be reduced. Warnings can be issued to people who violate laws. The government and public businesses want to partner with citizens to ensure good training in laws and safety. People and governance jointly working together to make India the most beautiful, smart and safe country of the world. India is the oasis, bringing dreams to life. India welcomes you.
I think with that in mind, I leave the floor with the last few words that I think this initiative by government and His Excellency, the Prime Minister of India, Shri Ravi Prashadji and all the team from Niti Aayog is one of the singularly biggest and the best initiatives to get the smartest of brains thinking about AI and unification of people and the government. I'm really happy that this thought has come, and this is the way to do it. Government and people jointly working to excel India beyond any other country globally. That's the face of it.
No, thank you, Jayant. Your personal story is very inspiring.
Thank you.
Brilliant work. Seeing is believing. I think the video actually showed us what you talked about. So fantastic.
Thank you.
I think so we come to the end of the session. I would like to thank all the panelists and definitely all the participants, because this is a collaborative effort, as Jayant put it, and this is a great platform where everyone has come together, and we're trying to probably create a discourse on how do we use AI responsibly in the context of India, in the context of Indian society and its people and its context. So fabulous. I've been privileged to be part of this panel. Learned a lot from all of you. Thank you so much. I think we're leaving the session with a lot of hope and constructive engagement and a sense of greater responsibility. We've had a lot of RI, so to say, real intelligence, talk about artificial intelligence, which is AI, in this session. So thank you everyone for being part of this, and good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone.